Thank you all for coming. From what I gather, y'all hate each other's guts. I gotta say, I get it. I just walked in the door and I already hate your guts.
Welcome to or back to Ingrid's Insights, the channel where I tease out meaning in TV, movies, and other media. Today we're looking at Dead City Season 2, Episode 1. Now, if you've seen most of my videos, you know that I'm a Deadhead, and most of my videos are about the Walking Dead universe. So let's get into Episode 1 of Season 2, titled Power Equals Power. So one of the insights I had was looking at the relationships between all of the characters. So looking at Doma and Negan's relationship, the Croat and Negan, Negan and his jailer, Doma and the Croats, Maggie and Herschel, Maggie, Jenny and Herschel, and then Negan's relationship with himself and his struggles that he's having, assuming that role that he once had as the leader of the Saviors. I wanted to see more of that internal struggle with Maggie as well, like Maggie's relationship with herself. We really just see Maggie's struggle in her relationship to other characters, which I think is necessary, but not all that a character needs to be well-rounded. Unlike Negan, I don't feel that Maggie's own internal struggle. I don't know. Like, maybe it's because she's technically a good guy and doesn't need to reflect on her behavior. So there's a sense of self-righteousness. I mean, Herschel wants her to reflect on her behavior. Herschel thinks Maggie is still wrapped up in Negan, which she is. They both are. But Maggie insists she isn't. She's just protecting the people of the bricks and protecting Herschel and Jenny. But realistically, I think she could have just let the others take care of themselves, meaning the people at the bricks, and let them decide if they wanted to enlist or be drafted into the New Babylon military. Maggie knows that the Croat is still after her and Herschel, so why put herself in that position? But, I'm thinking maybe, it's just her soul's purpose to finally somehow have some resolution with this relationship with Negan. I mean, what do you guys think? What is Maggie and Negan's relationship going to be by the end of this season? Do you think it will actually be resolved in some way? Just let me know down in the comments. I don't know, Maggie and Negan's relationship, I know for a lot of people it's gotten boring, and we definitely don't want to see it turn into a romantic thing. But they are like bound together, and I don't know exactly how it can be resolved. Maggie's relationship with her children just seems so typical. You can see kind of the petty jealousy between Herschel and Jenny. Jenny is hanging back while Maggie teaches Herschel how to hunt with the knife, and she's giving him like encouragement. And then there's Jenny in the background with this air of, I don't need a mother, I don't need to be guided. But we see by the time she gets back to the bricks that she does want to be seen by Maggie and understood too. And I love how writers communicate so much in simple gestures. Like here, when Jenny gives Maggie an annoyed look about asking if Jenny was okay, but once they got back to the bricks, Jenny glances at her hand like it's actually hurt, but she tends to it herself. We see by the end of episode 1 that Jenny wants Maggie to know she is strong and takes care of herself. Once Maggie decides to take the place of the 20 soldiers that might be drafted into the New Babylon army, Jenny immediately joins too. Now, is this demonstration to show her strength or to make Maggie proud? Maybe she is identifying with Maggie. I don't know. What do y'all think? She even tells Maggie, "You're not my mom." Which, if Maggie was really her mother, then Jenny would have said something like, "I hate you." Which is all so typical of teenagers. I love how typical life situations still find themselves in the Walking Dead universe. Weaving in these human stories is part of what keeps me coming back to The Walking Dead in general. So we move on, and Jenny and Maggie have to fight a whole corral of walkers like the badass women that they are, and then they head off to New York as equals, while Herschel stays at the Bricks. But we see by the end of the episode, he's prepping himself to go and meet up with them, finally getting that blade to stick. It's telling he's behind. Why do you think that is? Like, he's being left behind by Maggie. Is it because he's not mature enough? Is it because he's Maggie's biological child and she has more invested in keeping him safe? I don't know. Is it that he can't stand up to his mom? You know, Herschel was once kidnapped and Maggie fears for him, so maybe that's it. I don't know. But we know by episode 2 that Herschel finds Maggie and Jenny and the rest of the New Babylon so-called exploratory group and seems to have an intriguing relationship with the Doma. And that's something else that I really like this season, is that there's a mystery element to it. And I saw episode 2, and by the time that I publish this, episode 3 is already out, so I know I'm behind, but that's okay. And I haven't seen episode 3 purposely because I didn't want it to color what my review is here. So again, Herschel is in New York City, but we'll save that into episodes 2 and 3's insights, which I think I will combine. Now, for my next penultimate insight, let's look at the relationship between Major Pearlie, and Maggie. Now, Pearlie has been promoted to a colonel, and he's lied to his fellow New Babylon law enforcement about what really happened in New York with Negan. They think that Negan was killed. So, but we all know that that is not the case. So they'll probably all find out at some point. Well, most of them, because not everyone's going to make it once they get to New York. So eventually they'll find out that it's a lie, as Negan is leading the charge against the New Babylon troops. But you know what's interesting is that we see again this reoccurring theme of people sacrificing their personal values for military or political gain, and in some cases just ego and power. So the former major, newly promoted Colonel Pearlie, is proud of his new rank and lets Maggie know it. Though, really, it's pretty short-lived. She lets him know straight away that, well, as being a new member of the New Babylon ranks, I would be behooved to let the governor know that the truth about Negan, which is that Negan, of course, is alive in New York. And they have some disagreement about that, but then he finally says, okay, you can replace these 20 soldiers that would be drafted from the Bricks. But then we find out that he has very little power, even though it seems like his power is in name only, because the new Major Lucia Navarez, who is played by the Orange is the New Black character, which I really liked her on that show. It's hard for me to kind of get into her as this character, but you know, I'm reviewing episode 1, so we'll see. And I saw her in episode 2, and so we'll see. I want to give her a chance. But yeah, it's short-lived because he just doesn't seem like he has the power that he thinks he does, because Maggie ends up having to fight a whole corral full of walkers to prove that she's worth the trade. And then they have Jenny, who is there right by Maggie's side, as I mentioned earlier. Maggie and Jenny narrowly made it through the corral of walkers as the New Babylon officials looked on in amazement, killing off the last 2 walkers. By episode 2, we see that none of the rank in the military matters when faced with the gangs of New York and the ruthless Doma, not to mention the walkers and the Croat. So episode 1 sets up the power dynamics. Croat forces Negan to see the Doma and explains how Negan must lead the gangs against New Babylon. And Negan refuses, but because the Doma has access to Negan's wife and child, he's forced into this leadership. Interestingly enough, as I was writing my notes for this, I realized that yes, Maggie too was forced into leadership. I mean, she did suggest it. She took it on. So she volunteered herself to replace the 20 soldiers, but still she was forced into it to protect the people of the bricks and her son and Jenny, but Jenny chose not to be protected. So due to external circumstances, Maggie and Negan are being forced back together again, almost as if the universe is saying this situation between you needs to be resolved, and using external circumstances to see that through. So Negan reluctantly agrees to lead the gangs of New York. The Croat, however, is elated, and that brings me to the other relationship between Negan and the Croat. The Croat seems to worship Negan, or at least the leader that Negan used to be. When the Croat visits Negan in the beginning of the episode and sees Negan eating cockroaches, which seems to be some sort of karmic lesson for Negan, and he seems to be okay with just sitting in the cell in the dark, eating cockroaches, listening to his jailer, who I can't think of his name right now, playing the violin. He's kind of resigned himself to this lifestyle. But the Croat comes in and says, "I hate to see you this way." And by the time Negan meets the gangs of New York, we see the Croat sees Negan as an almost Christ figure. I mean, it's the images are everywhere. They meet in a church, so of course, but the positioning of where Negan is, standing underneath Christ, how excited the Croat is. But even before this meeting with the gangs, Negan is sitting in the confessional booth, and the Croat says,
"After a long break, when a performer takes the stage again, he wants to try out new material. But in the end, all the audience really wants are the greatest hits."
We see that though Negan might want to change, his external circumstances won't let him. And I was thinking, maybe it's the same for Maggie. So meaning, maybe Maggie just wants to stay home and be a mom. Stay at the bricks, but the external circumstances won't let her. And again, I understand, and I said this myself, she could have just stayed there and let everyone else deal with their own circumstances. But she, being the heroine, or if you prefer the term hero, needed to be there to protect everyone. But what do you guys think? I don't know. Let me know in the comments below. And it just popped in my head. There's this idea in the karmic idea is that you let other people deal with their own destinies instead of always jumping in to save everyone. And sometimes I feel like I don't know if that's true or not. You should be there to help people who can't help themselves. But I don't know. Again, tell me what you think in the comments below. The Croat is ecstatic that Negan has Lucille again and is resuming his role. You see all this Christ-like imagery in the background, and of course you're going to see it because they're in the church. But if you really pay attention to where Negan is standing and just how elated the Croat is, it's like he's risen again. And it's funny because Negan points out that they're in the church and none of them are truly Christ-like or even close to it, right? They're quite the opposite. But the Croat sees Negan as this Christ-like figure. But we soon find out that the Croat also plays the role of Judas to Negan in episode 2. So overall, this episode was better on a second watch, as I was paying close attention to the imagery, symbols, subtext to make sense of the characters. On the first watch, some of it was cheesy to me, I'm not going to lie, but I wasn't paying as close of attention as I would if I'm trying to review it. But you know, Negan looked old and tired. The Mad Max world building seemed a bit like played, you know, like derivative. But on the second watch, I was more forgiving of this whole world building, because I'm guessing that if I was in an apocalyptic world, that it would look something like that after all of the resources had run out. So I could see the vision that the writers had for the characters. So when it's all said and done, I'd give this episode a 7 out of 10. And by episode 2, things make more sense. So there's a couple of things I didn't mention, because one, I'm trying to do these reviews a little bit differently. When I'm looking at reviews, when people are just going in sequence and telling me everything I've already just watched, I'm not as interested. I'm just not. So it's not an actual recap or a retelling of the story in sequence, because that's not how I would want to hear the information. I'd rather hear how people see the characters and how they see the story play out. But there's a couple of things I didn't mention. So one relationship that I think is significant, but I did not mention, is the one between Negan and his jailer. But that will become more prevalent in episode 2. By the episode 2, and I feel I feel compelled to mention that, so stay tuned for that review. And also didn't mention the power dynamics of the methane gas, because this is essentially what the Doma and the Croat are fighting for, to keep control of the methane and to stay in power, and that the methane is allowing them to do that. So I wanted to put that out there. Anyway, if you have stuck around to the end of this video, please like, comment, and share. Liking doesn't cost you anything, or you can even dislike it if you didn't like it, and then comment and give me feedback about what you didn't like. Also, if you did like it, then share it and subscribe, and consider donating to my PayPal, as I am unemployed at this time and I am looking for employment, but this is something I really care about, and I spent a lot of time putting this together, even if it doesn't seem like it. I was telling someone on X that I used to be so critical of like minor errors in creators' videos, and now I see, you know, how many times it takes to record something, how problematic it can be during the editing process. So anyway, thank you for your time, and I'll see you in the next video. Toodles.